that out. So I'm going to jump in and hand it over here to Mark real quickly, but just think about this then as the place where potentially all ACI members could come and interact and connect with each other, whether that is overall communications on and work around the standards development side of the house, the committees and things, or if that is maybe some of those other special interest groups as well. Keep in mind, because we are fully integrated with Personify, we're able to control access to things by thereby the integration. So based on how someone is listed within Personify, we can show them things or not in the community based on how they're described within Personify. So the 7 or 8 of us on this call quite likely would have a different user experience when we come to the landing page here, because the 8 of us may see slightly different things because we belong to different entities, right? Maybe some of us sit on the board. Maybe some of us are on Committee 301. Maybe all of us are placed in the open forum, the all-member community, for example. So both in latest discussions or kind of think of this as an activity feed could be different in what we see, but also other dynamic community elements, such as a widget like this. I just grabbed your YouTube asset here of, why join an ACI committee. But this can be done in a dynamic way, understanding that maybe someone who's coming at the committee or the overall community now currently does not serve on a committee. We can see that within Personify and then entice them to join a committee and serve in something that interests them, right? Cross-promoting things like ACI University. So think of this really as a full CMS that you can use to make this landing page sticky, make it all about connecting with other people within ACI or connecting to other offerings, programs, content, publications within ACI as well. I simply grab your Twitter feed, Facebook feed, showing upcoming events. If you were to have the volunteer or mentor module, those could be highlighted within here as well, and so on. There is a gamification aspect in here as well. So whether you want to display that or configure it to display name, photo, points, or only some of those things, totally up to you guys and how you want to do that. And the last thing I'll mention probably that I think could be very useful to you guys from a dollars and cents standpoint is know that we have many clients who monetize their communities, and in fact, some of them paying for the cost of their community tools and then some with paid ads, sponsorships, probably, and this is just an example of a banner ad. I think I have sort of an in-column content ad or things like that. So think of, folks who are showing up, the heavy hitters that are showing up at World of Concrete or at some of your other events, could have exposure and things like this. We even have one client, it's actually a Chamber of Commerce client. Their community is funded entirely by Southwest Airlines, right? And they're the flagship sponsor. The clients who do that kind of thing the best are ones who will use the advertising for some paid ads and sponsorships, but also for cross promotion of other programs. Again, like register for fall convention, point people to the ACI University, and so on in your case. Okay? So any questions on that before I pass it over to Mark here?
Nope, I think we're good.
Okay, great. So Mark, I'm going to pass the controls over to you, and I think Mark's got a little bit different demo site to show you some things on that we've added some good examples to. So Mark, controls coming over here right now.
Okay, good. Thanks, Paul.
And you should have them.
Got it. Cool. Looks like are you seeing something called ethics subcommittee, everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So to follow on from Paul's lead in a little bit, this is a community inside of a larger site, and this is just a sales demo site. So the skinning and configuration is a little bit more generic because we use it for a lot of different purposes. And so it doesn't have your nice green ACI skinning that was on the other demo site that Paul was showing you. So Keep in mind, though, the concept of communities. In communities, in HigherLogic, communities, groups, committees, they're all analogous. It's the container, it's the master container for the experience. So we're looking at a community landing page here. For an organization as large as ACI, you would have a sort of a community navigator like this. This is a fairly small site, but you could see your entire committee structure represented in this kind of nested organization, the nested setup, and lets you navigate quickly to them. And you can nest these multiple layers. So this is just to give you a sort of a sense of how quickly you could navigate. I'm going to keep us mostly focused on the ethics subcommittee here today because we put in some demo material for us. On the landing page, again, these are very configurable. You've got a lot of control over what you do. You've got the discussion layer, which is very robust, and I think you've seen. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that today, but that's where people post and share information. A lot of engagement happens right at that layer. The library, which happens at the community level. This is sort of this is not the Workspace library. I'm going to show you that in more detail. This is more of a casual library, sort of an easier to use library for the entire community. So that's a standard part of every community landing page. There's an events module, and you will use this in your committee work. You always have recurring meetings for the technical groups to talk about building content and moving the documents through their life cycle. So those would show up here, and we can show you a little bit about how you set up meetings and recurring meetings and track attendance in those. Volunteer is a module I'm not going to get into. That's an optional module. This is kind of your roster, your list of people who are participating in the community. Since I'm an admin in this community, I'm going to show you sort of the administrative layer. Keep in mind what Paul was saying is, in most cases, and in your case, you would manage your membership in Personify and pull that data over here. So you wouldn't have to do this layer, which I'm showing you, but just to give you a sense that that roles are available here, that you can manage roles, and those roles let people do different things. Some of these types of roles probably look familiar to you, where you've got a voter or just an observer, a chair, co-chair. All of those roles would be managed in your AMS and just pulled over by integration. But this is a standalone site, so we can manage it here, just to give you a sense of the kind of complexity you can have in a roster for a particular community. So now I'm going to jump into the workspace. So a community, a workspace is an optional module. So this is a committee that needs a workspace. So it's just added to the community with a click in the administrative tool set. I don't need to show you how to do that, but you basically just turn it on. And once it's turned on, everybody who's got access to the community has access to the workspace tool set. And so before I get into that too much, and just with that kind of setup, any questions?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, good. I'll keep going then. So when you come into Workspace, you immediately land in the document library. And documents are kind of the heart of Workspace. It's a very robust document management system. We've put a few of your documents in here just to have some working documents in a demo scenario. Here you can control folders. You can name this any way you want. You can set up your document library. Each group has its own document library. Each community has its own document library. And you can make this document folder structure as complex or simple as you want. And it can really match it to your workflow for any particular community. And again, this is what you're seeing here is just this community's document library. And it's very easy to manage folders in here. If you just want to add a folder, it's simple to do that. You can add or manage the folder. Folders have a lot of capabilities. You can turn on things like auto naming for the folder so that every document that comes in follows a certain auto naming convention, and you've got variables here that you can add and put into the auto naming format box here. Some customers that need a lot of formality in document management will often use the auto naming. You can set who can put comments on documents and who can't. Where does that folder live? Description for the folder and so on. So you can make this folder structure very responsive to the way you work. So I'm going to go back up to the folders here and go into my folder structure. And what we did is we just made a little document folder for the 301 specification. And I'm going to go into the working drafts, and we've got a few of these documents in here to look at. So a few things right away that we see here. This is the main document we're going to be working with today. You see that it's got 4 revisions and 4 comments. So just with a little bit of time last week, we put some revisions on it. So let's just see what revisions mean when we manage a document. We get a little bit of document metadata at the top, and down at the bottom, I can see I can download this revision, which is also the latest revision. So let's see what's attached to this. Starting with revisions, I can see the whole life cycle of this document. So we started out with the initial submission of the document to the TAC, and then some public discussion about that, a draft with responses, and then a public draft for discussion, and then a final. And I know that's not formally all of your document management structure or your workflow, but I wanted to kind of just sketch it out a little bit and put some of the milestones in. Without knowing intimately how your actual committees work, I thought this would give us enough to give you a sense of how the tool works. So I can go back to any of these versions. I can go back to the original version just by clicking details, and now I'm back to the first submission. When the document is uploaded, you can put in a description as part of the upload. You can also change how it's named too, how it appears. When I did this upload, I just let it import the native file name, but you can change that file name as you add a document. If I just very quickly take you through that, if I just want to add a document to this page, I can change the display title, and that will override the default name or file name of the document. To add the document, you just pull it in from your hard drive. You put in your description here, whatever you want to add to it. This date, if you want to use the technical contact, you can do that. So maybe somebody is a technical contact for this document. Which folder are you going to put it in? We're going to put it in working drafts. And you can decide the state. These states are configurable. So you can say it's in the draft state. And you can connect it to a project, which is important. We'll talk about that again a little bit later, because that's where you kind of hold your ANSI data. And then when you put that document in, it's going to automatically notify everybody in the mailing list unless you tell it not to. By default, when you do things in Workspace, it wants to let everybody know. And you can put some additional data on that too if you want to highlight some information for the team. So I'm not going to add that. I don't want to clutter up the document library too much. But you get the idea. It's very easy to add a document with metadata. And you can also do a quick add where it's just, you only have 2 fields. So you have the detailed add and the quick add. Okay, back to our 301.16 document and its life cycle. So we've got the different revisions here. And there are different things you can do with the document once it's in here, besides run revisions on it. One of the things that people do is they can add comments to it. And if we look at the comment track here, you can see that there are multiple comments have been added to this document. They've been added to draft number 3, which is this draft. And a comment is basically a record attached to the document, follows the document around, which allows you to resolve and address particular comments about the document. This is the detail of this particular comment, and I just pulled something out of the actual draft of the document to have something to work with. But we can actually resolve this comment right here. We can say, you know, or we could put a very detailed response in, or we can cut and paste from another document and put it in here. Or if we may need this document assigned to somebody who's an expert, so we may need to assign this to Max. And in that case, Max will get an email in his inbox and tell him that this comment is waiting for his attention. We can change the state and the resolution. So we want this to maybe be, it hasn't been resolved yet, so I'm not going to change the state. You can actually add in a supporting file to this particular comment. And when I submit this, it's going to notify everybody that, that this comment has been sent, or I could just do the technical content, or just the document submitter, or just the comment submitter. So I've got a lot of control over who gets notified. It depends on how your workflow works, that you've got a lot of capabilities here. So I'm not going to resolve this comment. What I'm going to do is go to the whole comment interface. The comment interface is basically just a database of the comments that have been attached to the various documents in this committee, in this library. But I don't want to look at all the comments for all the documents. I really just want to look at the comments for the document we're working on right now today. So this is the draft with public discussion. So we had a draft. We got a lot of comments from the public. Those comments may have gone into the document, the Word document, as track changes. They may have come in from the public as just on a form, an entry form, or they may just have been in emails, in which case maybe the administrators for the committee are putting the email comments into this comment interface for resolution. So I've got 4 comments that I have to resolve here. I can just step through them, open them up one at a time, go through the update process, resolve them, assign them, you know, decide what we're going to do with it, and move forward, and keep a history of how every document comment was addressed. There is a history on everything, so you'll find a lot more metadata on the bottoms of these screens that you can unwrap as necessary. The system just keeps all of that information for you. So what I've done here quickly is I've gone through a very quick step through of the document management and the comment management. And before I go any further, I want to see if there's any questions.
There were several places where you said things like, you know, you can decide who gets to comment on this document or something like that. Were you talking about ACI gets to decide in general, or are you talking about the actual, like, committee chair who's putting a draft up there? Do they make a lot of those decisions?
The committee chair has a lot of control, but a lot of those permissions are set by roles, and those roles are can be fairly carefully controlled. I don't want to get too far into the back end here, but in the settings, in the roles for Workspace, you can decide what a role can do. So if you want to allow a member, for example, to be, you know, manage comments, manage attendance, manage ballots, you know, you can make those settings here in the role setting. And then when people are participating inside the committee, their role in that group, in that particular community, controls what they can do. So if you wanted somebody to be able to make comments, they'd have to have a role that allows participation. For example, they wouldn't be just an observer, which usually observers are read-only. They'd be have some kind of write authority. But those are configuration settings that you make on a committee by committee basis in the settings for the participants, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And just to make sure I understand, to add to that, Mark, I might be a participant in one group and committee and might have comment access, and another group I might be an observer and not have comment access.
That's exactly right.
And I also I'm the group leader, I may decide that this group, these specific people should have comments, these specific people shouldn't comment, and then this final revision, no one can comment. I could make those decisions as well, right?
You can make those decisions, and because you're an administrator, you can change those roles of those members right here on the fly. So if you wanted to turn off a lot of control for people quickly, you could turn those roles on and off. Like I could make somebody an observer and suddenly ratchet down their editability very quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So let's just jump back into Workspace here. So we're back in the document library. Again, folder structure can be deep and wide or very shallow. This one's pretty small. Again, we're looking at the the document history for this one. We have the multiple drafts. And the other thing that's common that standards teams do is they vote on documents. So for this one, there's no ballot on this one, but if I go back a couple of revisions, I believe it's version 3, we may have moved this document forward to the point where it's ready to vote, ready to get a group decision on it. So for this one, let's see, is that number 3? I have to go back one more, I think. So we did open up a letter ballot on this this draft, and again, forgive me for maybe mixing up some of the steps in your process. Letter ballots may happen at different draft points than what I've represented here. I just tried to, like I say, sketch it out a little bit. But let's take a look at what this ballot was. What we're doing is we've got this document to a point where we need to get the committee to move it forward into the next defined decision point. So shall we approve it? This will open it up to everybody who's eligible to vote inside the committee. And they get the way we've set it up is if you vote affirmative, you're done. If you vote negative, we want you to give us a comment as to why you're voting negative, or you can abstain. Those are the 3 choices. And those are fairly common in the standards development process, but you can change those settings when you set up the ballot. You can make comments prohibited at any step. You can make comments required at every step. It's entirely up to you, but this is kind of a standard default. I voted, so we can see here on the vote in the voting details, you can see, I actually haven't voted yet. When the voting is done, you'll be able to see how everybody has voted. You'll be able to see how they voted by interest category if you're using interest categories. And you can get a tally of the vote percentages here. So the balloting in Workspace is pretty sophisticated, and you've got a lot of flexibility about how you set up ballots. So it's very easy to set up a ballot attached to a particular document or any draft. So if I just jump back to my document library here, and I pick any document that's ready to vote, for example, this one, I can just, at this point, create an approval ballot for this document. And now I'll step you very quickly through some of the settings here. This is, again, it's an approval ballot, so the comments are either the choices are affirmative, negative, or abstain. Again, that's all configurable by you. I can decide the opening date and closing date. This is going to be open for a week, and what time it closes, the time zone I'm using. We can determine who's voting. Is voting dependent on their meeting attendance? Some committees have requirements that you have to have attended more than 50% of the last, say, 6 meetings. You can track meeting attendance in HigherLogic communities and Workspace and use that attendance to determine voting eligibility. You can decide who can leave comments, just the voters or anybody who can view the document, and then who can see those comments. Is it related to a project? Again, is this something that's formal for the sort of the ANSI life cycle of this standard, or is it not? If it is, you're probably going to attach it to a project, which is kind of the master holder for a standard. You can add in other documents from the library if they're relevant, and you can decide how you share these results. You're going to make them available when it closes, as soon as it's open, in progress. So you can really control the visibility of this quite a bit. I can take this off, and it will be available only to administrators. And then notifications, it'll automatically send it when it opens and closes, but you can also elect to send timed reminders. So if it's really important and you really need to drive participation in the ballot, you can go ahead and set timed reminders and let these the system remind the non-voters. Once people vote, they won't get the reminder anymore, but you've got the ability to sort of nag them until they do vote. So that's a lot of flexibility in the ballot settings. And if it's something you're doing frequently, if those settings are common, you can just save it as a template. And then you could save some of these steps when you're doing approval ballots on common documents. The ballot library is going to also show you everything that's going on, what's open for voting, and what's closed for voting. You can tell this is a sales site because there's not a lot of voters. This is like one vote on each one. But you could also set a different kind of ballot here. Besides the approval ballot, you can just make a regular ballot. And the regular ballot lets you have many different types of options. I might want to say I'm going to have custom selections. You know, what choice? Oh, I shouldn't have hit enter on that one. What color do we want the new conference room to be? So I can have as many options as I want. And I can decide whether commenting is allowed for each answer. I want to have maybe I can add an other, open and close dates. All of that is familiar. Just so you see that there are basically two flavors of ballots. The one which is the approval ballot, which is just for up and down voting a document, and then the open kind of ad hoc ballot we call it, which is general purpose, used for kind of more other types of committee work besides just document approvals. So let me take a breather there and see if there's questions about balloting.
Yeah, so I didn't see where you could require a comment based on the type of vote. Like if someone votes negative, is there a way to require them to post a comment if they vote negative?
Yeah, it would be here.
It's required. That was required everyone.
Only if you vote no. So this is, I could do yes, no, abstain. So if I vote no, we're making it, and it just pops up a new window and they have to fill that out before the ballot will be accepted.
Okay, all right.
And you've got those options, right, Mark, for all of those dispositions. Yes, with a comment or without a comment, no comment required or no comment required or optional, and same
right.
for abstain. I mean, you can go through all of those states.
No, I get it.
Right. So quite a bit of power in the balloting, especially attached to the document approval cycle. I'm going to touch quickly on action items. Action items are pretty much what you'd expect to see here. These are tasks for yourself or your coworkers. some committees will use these to kind of outline just the key task. It's not really that practical for like, miniature to-dos that you might just put in your Outlook list. But these are like, 3 days heads up for the TAC meeting, make sure all the documents are ready or something like that. And you could create them for yourself or somebody else. That's the beauty of it, is I can make them for Paul, and then I don't have to worry about it anymore. Who's this going to be for, right? And you can bounce them back and forth. So Chris may get this, and he may give me, put a comment on it and bounce it back to me, and I may put another comment on it and bounce it to somebody else until we finally close it out. So it's just kind of a way to put in to-dos for yourself or the committee. The tool that a lot of standards developers use, though, is the project layer. And this is another kind of powerful layer in Workspace that lets you do project management at sort of a macro level. So you think of a project as a way of rolling up the important work of a committee into a kind of a final state. So again, we've sort of built a miniature project here. If you look at this list, our standards developers that use Workspace a lot will have several hundred projects going on, and they're all searchable. So if you do have a big list, finding them by name is easy. Or finding them by various states. So if something is done, you just want to hide it, you can do that. Or if it's just particular groups that you're working on, that you want to see what their projects are. So you can find your projects if you do have a big list. We've got a lot of filtering to make that easy to manage. This project that we set up is one of the pre-built templates. This is called an ANSI project type. And it's called an ANSI project type because the face page includes the key fields that roll up to the PINs and BSR forms. So if you fill out when you edit this and create this project, that data that you put in the overview fields, they roll into the ANSI project types. So I haven't filled this out perfectly right yet. These fields, if you work with ANSI at all, should look fairly familiar to you. But once you fill these in, they'll automatically roll into the forms when you submit them. So I'm going to go back to the overview. And when I talk about the forms, they're pre-built in here. The PINs BSR 8 and BSR 9 forms are built in, and they will auto-populate with that data from those fields that I just showed you. Something we're working on, it's still in QA, it's still in test, is a direct API feed from this system into ANSI's backend standards system. The way it works now in this version is it generates the PINs form, it generates a data set, and it goes in an email to an inbox at ANSI. And then they import it into their system. But they have finally created an API that we've been testing that will just take the data. We'll still generate the PINs form, but instead of creating a little data file for an email, it's going to just API it directly to their system with validations. So we're looking forward to them getting that done for us. We've been asking for it for 5 years, and they finally got to it.
Not a big surprise.
Yeah, it's not the fastest moving organization on the planet. What you've got here in the project layer is things from, like I said, things from the committee, from the group, that are important to the life cycle of this, in this case, standard. And so documents that are important, documents, draft stages, ballots that were important to this life cycle, you can just attach them in the group to the project with a click, and then they go into the history here, and then they become part of the kind of the audit trail, the history of the project. we have activities here which are different than action items. Activities are kind of what we call them milestones. And this is, I kind of sketched it out here for you a little bit, but this might be a 2-year project, and you can kind of put the major milestones in here and track against them. So maybe the draft is done and we would mark it as complete and let people know. We can notify the whole group that it's been done. And then it'll be marked complete and go into the record and show us complete. So very common to see the major milestones of a committee's life cycle put in here. And then it's easy to kind of make a template for project types. You can set a project type template. This is an ANSI project type, but you can create your own project type as well. And you can see which projects this is working on, is work from the ethics subcommittee. And if I want to drill back down into the subcommittee, I just follow this link back down. Now I'm back into the workspace for the subcommittee. When I'm in a document and I edit the details of that document, this is where I could move it up into the project level. So I'm going to scoot down here. So if I want to attach it to a project, I just do that here, add it to the project. Now it becomes part of that, like the master level project. So questions. I've got 10 minutes to the top of the hour. Be happy to take any questions or drill into something in more depth.
Have you guys this is Paul, have you guys on the ACI team seen or have anything else that you would like to see within there, or elements in your process that you haven't seen that you're wondering about?
Just digesting.
Yeah.
You guys have your own system that you've had for quite a while, as I understand it, and it's probably does a lot of these things, but slightly different ways, right? I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Are you seeing any gaps? Is there anything that's like we absolutely love doing X?
Well, we might do, maybe all the ANSI people do things a little bit differently, but you start out a change to a document or original content to a document with a ballot, as you have shown, and then they have a thing called basically the negative resolutions. So you have negatives. ANSI is unclear on how you go about resolving negatives. You must build a process to resolve negatives. You can do it through more balloting, as you have already presented, but we handle that either through another online ballot or in a meeting minutes. And that's probably a gap we have, is it's difficult to show the resolution of all the negatives. If they didn't use the online ballot system, then it has to be in a set of minutes. And then a set of minutes can hold resolutions to many documents. And that's something that I don't know if we struggle with it, but if there's a place where we start to break down in our tracking system, that is where we break down. And if we can't find it, then the committee has to go back and ballot some more. So I mean, I'm not quite sure when I'm watching this if it can make it any easier, any worse. I don't know if you're following me or not.
Yeah, let me see if I understand. I think we have a kind of an easy path for that. I've showed you comments on the document that were sort of entered in one way or another. So let's say I'm voting negative, but now I'm going to be required to add a comment here.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to say it's not right. And we often like people to actually put in a proposed solution. You can make this required, but I'm not in this case. But it's like, but it'd be great if you say, hey, I don't like it, but here's the solution. But even if they don't, and I don't have to put in anything more than this. It'd be great if I put the page number on it or something, but
Right.
it doesn't matter. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to notify anybody. I'm just going to save this. I'm going to vote and save this. So I've added my comment. I'm going to vote. Now I've got a comment in the system. So if we go to the ballots, I'm still the only person who's voted, but my negative comment has been recorded. So look, there it is, negative with comment.
Mm-hmm.
Now you guys know you've got a comment, you've got to resolve. It will travel with the ballot, and you can resolve it from inside the ballot. Let's see. I'm an administrator. I think I can do this down here. There's the comment that was collected during voting. There's my comment. I can resolve it here because I'm an administrator. I can just update this comment and handle it because I'm in the comment interface now. Or if you wait till voting's all done and then you have the administrators get together and you have a meeting and we're looking for comments on, I think it was this one. Oh, well, here it is right at the top because it's new. But it's attached specifically to this vote. So this is a comment attached to a ballot, attached to a document. And now I can decide how that's resolved. So the comments are here. I can resolve this by updating it. And we're going to say we fixed it, we'll put the new content in, whatever it is. And then we can decide that it was resolved or it was not an issue. Let's say it was fixed and it's addressed. And I submit that. And I go back into my comments interface. So now you've got a history of that it was addressed, the state's changed, it's attached to the document and the ballot. And since the ballot rolls up to the projects, the whole life cycle is together. The ballot, the document, the comments, the negative comment with negative vote with a comment, all connected. And then you could just show that whole life cycle to ANSI in one swipe. It's all up here.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's kind of one of those things, hopefully, that you're seeing like with HigherLogic and Workspace, with Workspace enabled together. You're really not only getting the software that helps you guys do those things, but the best practices and answers that go along with them from a company that works with a whole bunch of other ANSI relevant groups. So that's certainly what you'd be getting with the HigherLogic team, with the community and the Workspace enabled within it.
So we got pretty deep here into the guts of Workspace. I bet it is a lot to digest. So if we need to kind of revisit later, if you had some time to think about it, happy to do that.
Okay.
Does that just on that negative resolution item? Does that seem like a better path forward, and maybe a good opportunity to not lose things within the process that you're currently having?
Well, we define resolution of negatives slightly different. So it requires more. So I mean, what your track system would allow me to put a comment in, but I would still have to be resolving that negative with another vote at another location per our process. But anyways, I mean, it's, like you said, we've been around a while. We've run into these issues many times. We have our way of doing things and have little tools that do this and that. You're right, this is nice. We don't have an automated BSR8 form maker or anything like that. You know, but so you're doing things, we're doing things. I think that's just, is it difficult for us to maintain or not? Or those are questions I guess we got to ask internally.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly, and I think that's where, you know, again, those are conversations that you guys need to have, but also just know that the HigherLogic overall team is on, you know, I guess I would call it continuous development path with all the product lines, and those continuous development paths, those paths themselves are oftentimes, as you guys would hope, but as you might also guess, largely driven by client need and things within that process. I don't know, Mark, if you wanted to speak to the evolution of things over the years, but that's typically how we tackle things. Development updates, or we handle things with the product overall, the overall community platform, marketing automation, the workspace in different modules on a quarterly basis. So there's a, you know, seasonal release, if you will. So, you know, a fall, a winter, a spring, a summer kind of release. Not that each particular module will be updated in those particular releases each time, but they may be if needed, or if there's development in those areas. So I don't know, Mark, if you wanted to comment on that further at all, or.
Yeah, I mean, the product you're looking at here is the result of, you know, probably 10 plus years of working for technical consortia, alliances, and SDOs. And in the last 6-7 years, a lot of focus on SDOs, trying to really make it work for the broad spectrum of SDOs. It will continue to get better. We always find cases where we you know, somebody says, we do it this way, and we go, well, you can do it this way, but it's a little awkward. Maybe we can smooth that out, and more people would be able to do it that way also, and broadly benefit the whole team, that's the whole customer base. So we kind of think about it that way. We've got a great product management team and a great process for taking in comments and trying to get them into the development cycle.
Okay.
So we're a couple of minutes over. I'm just looking at our time. We're a couple of minutes over that hour, so we should probably wrap up. And unless you guys have further questions or things that we can answer, I think we can certainly stay on a bit from our side if you want to dig a little bit deeper into things. The one thing that I could mention too is, you know, sometimes these things require a little bit deeper conversations and deeper dive demos, and really sometimes even those, hey, we'd like to see how it handles this sort of thing, and actually kind of rolling up our sleeves and climbing into it. We're happy to do those things. We're actually happy to come to your offices as needed, maybe as a next step. So just know that we're certainly willing to do those things as well. But any questions that you guys can fire our way at this point before we close today?
I think we're good. Yep.
Okay, and then so we know on this end, how should we continue the conversation, or maybe next follow-ups or next steps that you guys see from your end?
I think at this point in time, we probably need some internal discussion and time to, as we said, digest. And I think probably the most expeditious way is we'll let Kevin get back in touch with you on whatever if any of the recommended next steps are, whether it's a more specific follow-up or something more general. At some point in time, and it may be too premature because we don't have a really tight spec on this, we'd also have to be looking at the financial implications, because that would come into any kind of decision-making process, obviously.
Yeah, certainly, and I can provide that even in advance, that can show things like the core with the workspace enabled and things of that nature, and then any of those other optional type modules that I just touched on briefly, that we would want to look at. Maybe that's for some of the others in the room. thinking beyond just the standards development piece, maybe the volunteering and the mentoring could be of some interest. We could certainly dive into those, but I can share, and I've done that with Kevin in the past, but I think it hasn't included Workspace. So Kevin, I can have coming your way a refreshed proposal for the elements that we're talking about here, but you can kind of see then how it's scalable to be used in other areas or some of these other elements, right? And can kind of go and grow, whether you implement those at the beginning or sometime down the road when, maybe there's a push to have more students bridging that gap of student membership to actual membership, right? And that mentoring component might be a helpful tool to help some of those things. You can add that at any time down the road. So I can certainly do that. And then I'll share with you certainly the recording today. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I would say that I think that would be a key piece of information in here because no matter what decision we make, there'll be a financial component. So I think we'd be certainly understanding that it's not a final quotation, but at least some ballpark numbers so that we can judge what we might get against what we already have and what kind of value that might bring to the table. Yeah, certainly can do that. All right. Anything else that I can follow up with? So I'll follow up with the recording that we have going through today's session, and I can follow up with, I could even send the slides along that we went through. This one would be included in that, and then certainly that sort of that budgetary pricing look. Anything else that you think might be helpful from today's conversation?
No, I think that sounds good, Paul.
Okay. Great. I'll work on that and get that coming your way, latest midweek, I would say, and we'll keep the conversation open.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.